Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Righthand, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Marketing at SCS Global Services. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We'll be taking on a very focused topic for this short webinar of greenhouse gas verification for entities. First, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping details. Our webinar is being recorded today, and the recording will be emailed out after the webinar is completed. If you have questions that come up during this short webinar, please type them into the questions box, and we'll see if we have a few minutes at the end to get to any questions. Those that can stay on, we'll try to take some questions at the end. And if there are a lot of questions that don't get answered, we'll try to take those offline. So with that, I just would like to say a few words about SCS Global Services. We're an international leader in third-party environmental and sustainability certifications, verifications, and validations. We ensure the credibility of sustainability claims that you want to make in the marketplace. We help companies reduce risk, meet sustainability goals, and stand out in their markets. And we have offices all over the world. We've been in business nearly 40 years. We work in virtually all sectors of the economy, and we also develop leading standards through our standards development organization. We've been working in greenhouse gas verification since 2008. Our program is accredited by ANSI, and we've performed hundreds of verifications with some of the top Fortune 100 and Global 100 companies. So let's take a look at what the topic is for today, what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about entity-wide greenhouse gas verification. Why do we need it? What is the verification process? What is the level of assurance? What are some of the verification schemes and the timing? Why should we verify? So, as you can see from this diagram, which is loosely taken from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, your greenhouse gas inventory is an inherently complex system. I mean, just look at this. There are direct emissions, there are indirect emissions, you've got scopes 1, 2, and 3, you've got a lot of different greenhouse gases, and it all rolls up into one number. It's an integration of accounting. Did I put the correct values in? And engineering. Did I transform those values into greenhouse gas emissions appropriately? These are multi-layered systems involving various people at your company, potentially, and various technology platforms. Often inventories will cross over into various departments. Maybe marketing handles it, maybe manufacturing handles it, maybe multiple departments. It could span different regions, different countries, and even third-party companies that may do the inventory for you or gather the data and roll it up for you. These are dynamic systems that evolve over time. They can include organizational changes such as new facilities, mergers, divestitures, and they can also include changes to methodologies being followed or staff operating your systems. So again, very dynamic, changing all the time, changing year over year, and your stakeholders are only seeing the output of all of this. And I kind of love this diagram because it's got a little bit of a double meaning. It's like all the emissions are rolling up into the atmosphere, but they're also rolling up into one number. On the screen, you see a simple, very simple representation of an inventory system. Your inventory will be much, much more complex. As one example, primary data records, take for instance, energy invoices, at the bottom of the pyramid are entered into a tracking system. And then those are put through further calculations, aggregated, and rolled up into the greenhouse gas assertion. Again, the assertion at the top of the pyramid is the one thing that your stakeholders see. Errors can show up throughout this system with various levels of significance that can affect the final number. There are a few common errors that I've displayed over here on the right-hand column, going from the bottom up. Missing invoices, invoices that are interpreted wrong. Maybe they're keyed in wrong. Maybe they're double counted. The units might be off. The emission factors could be wrong. The estimation methods could be off. The units could be wrong. The unit conversions could be wrong. All of that leading up to an assertion that is just not completely accurate. So it's really important to know that you're collecting the data properly, aggregating it properly, and reporting it properly. Here's a schematic of what the verification process looks like. The verification will start with a pre-engagement. During the pre-engagement, we must take a look at scoping your project. Every greenhouse gas verification will need to be scoped individually. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Obviously, the amount of time and effort needed to verify a 5-office law firm will look much different than a global 100 company with 150 facilities across the world and multiple offices. So each verification must be accurately scoped, and then we must evaluate any potential conflict of interest that we might have. Obviously, we have to be a neutral third party and be able to render a completely accurate verification that is not influenced by any external factors. Next, the verification planning phase will kick off with a meeting, and it follows an ISO requirements, and it takes a systematic look at your inventory and samples data throughout the system to evaluate that it's properly functioning. So going back to the slide before, we'll be looking at a sampling of data to make sure that those different roll-ups, that those errors are not happening and being carried over and compounded. During the planning phase, it's very important from the client, from your perspective as a client, to have your inventory completely ready, to have up all your backup data, you know, to have the person that's most familiar with the data ready to help with the data request, that you complete the data submission in a timely manner, and that's all happening during this verification planning phase. Then we will design the verification activities, and this will lead to what we do when we evidence gather. We're going to recalculate a sample of your inventory, and then we're going to report the findings. Now, sometimes we will find errors that result in us coming up with a different number, if that number is deemed to be what is called material, which means that it's plus or minus 5%, causing an error in your inventory number. We will report those as corrective actions back to you, the client, and you will have the opportunity to, you know, dig in and fix those errors. So it's really important that during the verification process that you are available to correct those errors, and that you do so in a timely way so that we can proceed with a positive verification statement. Next would come, once all of those corrective actions are cleared, next would come the completion of the verification, where we would draft a report and a statement. The statement can be used public facing. It can be used to put in your CSR report, to report up to your C-suite, to publish on your website, and we recommend that you do that. It's also what's used to report to the reporting organizations and can help you with reporting there. Then that before we can issue those, the draft report must go under independent review. So we're engaging with you to check your work, and then we are having our work checked by an independent reviewer who is qualified to review greenhouse gas verification reports. So what is level of assurance? Basically, you have two levels of assurance. You have limited and you have reasonable. And it comes down to the degree of rigor and the resulting conclusion. I think when we look at the conclusions, that kind of gives you that nuanced sense. But let's just say for limited, there is a little less evidence gathering compared to reasonable. For reasonable, we're actually digging into the backup, the invoices themselves, and making sure that they were entered correctly. Some of that is done with limited, but I think that the conclusions really lead you to the exact sort of difference. So the conclusion with limited is that nothing has come to the attention of the verifier that there is a material misstatement. But the conclusion with reasonable is that we have a reasonable level of confidence that there is no material misstatement. So that's just sort of the nuanced difference between limited and reasonable. So let's take a look at the verification timeline and some of the factors that influence the timeline. A typical verification takes a minimum of 8 weeks. It can take longer as well, but minimum of 8 weeks. We like to have that amount of time to be able to have some back and forth, to be able to give you time to clear any errors that we find, and be able to issue a positive verification statement. Deadlines, if you're reporting to CDP, the deadline this year is July 26th. Now that deadline is really just if you want to be scored by CDP. If you are doing your CDP submission as part of a supply chain request, that deadline, depending on who your supply chain requester is, may have a different deadline, so you would need to check on that. The climate registry, which is a reporting framework more for, usually more is involved with cities, utilities, universities, water districts, is pretty much all year long. They don't have a set deadline by which you have to submit. What are the factors that may influence the timing and the cost? The size and the complexity of the inventory. Are you doing limited or are you doing reasonable? That can definitely make a difference. The documentation of your methodology. Are you all ready to go on day one, which is what we recommend? Have your inventory, your backup documents, the transparency of your inventory data. If we have to dig to find out, how you came up with certain data points, that's going to take longer in the verification process. Access to the supporting evidence and knowledgeable staff, as I mentioned before. This is very important, that in order to kind of streamline your verification, that you have all of that put together. Findings and corrective actions. If you've never verified before, you just don't know what you don't know. There could be more than one round of back and forth finding errors and correcting those errors. And then on-site verification. So what are the benefits of verifying? I think the most important thing, what we hear from our clients time and time again, is that it gave them confidence that they were reporting the right number. It gives you that confidence with your internal stakeholders as well as your external stakeholders. We often find that when we've even had people that have verified in the past and we've still found material errors, They're like, wow, you know, we didn't know we had those errors baked into our inventory. So you're going to be really glad. You're going to go to all the effort to develop your inventory. You want to know that those efforts are accurate. Verifying your greenhouse gas inventory can help you improve your ESG ratings and your CDP score. This is a very well-known factor. It can help you meet supply chain requests. And it will help you be prepared for all of the future disclosure requirements that seem to be swirling out there. You know, the FAR rule, GSA and DOD look like for suppliers of certain size, they're going to require this. Everybody's familiar with the recent SEC proposed ruling, which is a bit, you know, tied up in legality, I think, right now, but there seems like every day we're seeing a new proposed reporting rule. So it's just a good idea to be aware of those. So in summary, verification will help you improve your reporting. It can help you increase your CDP score. The deadline for CDP, if that's who you're reporting to, is July 26th. And you can report to the climate registry pretty much throughout the year. Just like to say a little bit more about potential additional services that SCS has at our disposal. We do greenhouse gas inventory preparation. So if you haven't developed your scope 3, that's something we can help with. We have a consulting arm of our business that can actually take on your CDP reporting for you and help you submit. We do CORSIA, which is the verification for international flights. We do carbon neutral certification, product carbon footprinting, and we also verify carbon offset projects. So with that, we are pretty much at time, and I can take a few questions. So let me go to the question docket here and see if we have any questions. The first question is about assurance. If we have not verified yet, should we start with limited assurance? This is really what we recommend. We see verification and assurance as sort of a road that you get on and you start walking down. And I think if you start your verification at the limited level, make sure that it's in good shape and you don't have too many back and forth rounds, you can progress it. So maybe you start with scopes 1 and 2 at limited. You next year you maybe add some scope 3 categories. Then maybe you move to scopes 1 and 2 reasonable. It's a kind of a trajectory. Let's see, we have other questions. What is the climate registry? It's just another reporting framework. So if you're a global company and you use an ESG tool, why would you need to do on-site verification? So on-site verification usually comes into play when you're pursuing a reasonable level. And especially for a global company, I mean, we work with some very large global companies. Say you have facilities in areas of the world where there may be more risk with your emissions profile. We would want to do on-site visits to see the actual verification process, the data entry and whatnot. So that's a common thing that could be included in a reasonable. Do we verify to both TCR and CARB MRR? Yes, we do. I'm looking to see who will be needed internally to support the verification process. this would be the people that are most knowledgeable about your inventory. So the people that actually input the data, run the data system, that would be important. What is a CDP score? So CDP assigns scores based on the report that you submit. And you can find more information about that at the CDP website. Let's see. Looking to see what other questions we might have. You mentioned a minimum of 8 weeks for verification with the impending SEC regulations due to include scopes 1 and 2 in company financial statements. How do you work around this? So again, you would want to verify. We do the verifications for 2022 in 2023. The reporting for CDP is basically opens up at the beginning of the year. One thing that I didn't mention is that CDP reporting is sort of like tax season. Everybody tends to come in around March. March to July is the busiest time. So the sooner you can get your inventory ready and be able to submit, the sooner you can verify and have that done. So I think that's pretty much the questions that we got. Someone says, we don't have anything in place in the way of measurement or tracking. Where do you recommend we start? So you're going to need to start with developing your corporate scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas inventory, and our consulting team or could help you, or our SCS Global Services team does do inventory development. Obviously, if we're going to develop and verify your inventory, we would need to separate that. We can't do both, but our consulting team could do part and we could do part. So with that, I think I will end the webinar. I thank you very much for being part of our webinar today, and we look forward to hearing from you and working with you in the future. Thank you so much.